there's a box of things that I know that I don't know. Like, I'm not a rocket science, right? There's no way that I will ever launch a rocket. And then there's a box of things that I don't know that I don't know. And it's in that box that I really like the quantum field of it, that I love to sit and explore because there's so many fascinating things that who would have known, right? One little biohack and it shifts your whole entire life.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to Call Me CEO. This is your host, Camille Walker, and here we celebrate mothers building businesses of all kinds and of all people and of all places. It's such a good place to be. Thank you for being here and tuning in, being a part of this community and sharing the show. I appreciate your messages, your DMs, and the inspiration that you get here because same, like I love it so much. And today we are going to be so fed with amazing inspiration, not only for yourself and your business, but we're going to talk about parenting and kids as well when it comes to human design, using your energy the best to your ability, and also creating space for wellness too. Akari Busto is an emotional biohacker who her specialty is looking into health and how to really get into the system of your body so that you can grow in all areas of your life. So thank you, Akari, for being on the show. We've already had such a fun pre-interview. I'm so excited to hear what comes out with our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it's so fun to share the magic, right? I always say there are three boxes in our world. The box of things that I know, or like I know how to drive. There's a box of things that I don't know, like I'm not a rocket science, right? There's no way that I will ever launch a rocket. And then there's a box of things that I don't know that I don't know. And it's in that box that I really like the quantum field of it, that I love to sit and explore because there's so many fascinating things that who would have known, right? One little biohack and it shifts your whole entire life.
Mm. It's true. I feel like there is so much information available to us now about understanding more of our mental health, the way our bodies function, the way sleep affects our ability to think the next day. I mean, it all really is so connected. So I love that we're going to dive into this. Please introduce yourself and a little bit about you, your business, your family, where you live, all of that good stuff.
Thank you. Yes. So my name is Akari, and I call myself an emotional biohacker. I live in the city of Long Beach, California, and I find that my work has been very foundational in the sense where I work with the nervous system and I carry it very, very gently because there's so much room for re-traumatization when we're working with the nervous system that I really take that into consideration. I've seen it happen. I have had it happen to me. And so for me, being very diligent with the foundational work, which means that my work is based off of three pillars, which is the mind, the body, and the soul. And my favorite analogy is a lot of us get into the car, right? We get into our car, we turn it on, and we just drive, we go. What happens with our vehicle, our body, is that if we don't put the right gas in our body, we're not going to be able to just flip the switch and go. Like there's so many different things that you can do. So I've applied science-backed technology to, it's almost like a biofeedback sensor that you get to plug in and you can actually see your nervous system live and operating. So when someone says, hey, you just need to calm down, it's like, okay, what does that feel like? What does that look like? And I'm a data girl. So science is like my jam. And so when you're playing with the sensor and you start to see that, you start to recognize there's a new awareness that comes in around what does calm really mean and feel. So my work is really, I like to say, foundational, where as you start to learn these tools, you are going to be able to apply it to any other circumstance in your life because new level, new devil, right?
Yeah.
Every new challenge that we have, we've never been there before. And our nervous system doesn't know what to do. So I try to prepare you so that every time you come into a new challenge, something else comes up, you go back to basics, which is using your biofeedback sensor and starting that resilience. You're building resilience. It's a tool to help you build resilience.
I love that. What was it that got you interested in this field of work?
My daughter, I worked corporate and just I was in, and believe it or not, I was doing international banking and traveling and coming and going and doing. And that in and of itself is very stressful
Mm-hmm.
because being the only woman at the table with a bunch of men isn't always what we think it's going to be, right? We think of men as being like direct, getting things done, like go-getters. We have our preconceived notions of what that looks like, and it's nothing like that. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of threat, there's a lot of competition happening.
Mm.
Um, so there was a point where my daughter got sick, and you're pivoting, you're doing all the things that you can, and my nervous system just crashed. It was just too much for my nervous system. And there was nothing, right? There was nothing available. The awareness wasn't even there around building your resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started getting into this space was I needed to find a way to meditate because I would hear like you just need to get into the zone. So I tried transcendental meditation, which is 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, but it was so boring. My
Mm-hmm.
brain was like, we're not having this. Like, we're so into the chaos. Like, the quiet isn't feeling good. So I did my first breathwork class and I was sold. I was like, where has this been all of my life?
Mm. Yeah.
It was the first time that my body got to disconnect from my brain. And I knew that this was exactly what I wanted to get into. So I tapped into breath work first. And then it all slowly started to, it was like a ripple effect. I started here and just started to get more and more curious about how deep I could go and understanding the nervous system and understanding what it really is doing. Because you think, God, I feel so great when I do breath work, but you don't understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
And in my human design, I have a little gate that always asks, why? I want to know why. I'm very curious.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it started to bring me through all of this and through the work, that inner work that I had to do, the shadow work, the letting go, the reparenting of myself, it just created so much more joy, so much more of that innate thing where we always say you can't find happiness outside, you have to find it within. And so I was able to build my bubble. I guess that's what I would call it, my safety bubble of joy, that it doesn't matter where I go, other people's emotions and feelings and whatever is not going to affect my bubble because I'm in control of my bubble now.
Ooh, that's powerful. I feel like that's something that, especially where we live in such a go, go, go environment, especially being in the United States
Mm-hmm.
and wearing more and more hats and feeling like we have to do everything, that's a very common feeling that a lot of women have, especially where we're expected to keep quiet about negative emotions we might have bubble up when we are dealing with so much stress. So I'm curious for someone who's listening and maybe thinking, "Ooh, I totally relate with that. I need to bring my nervous system back into a safe place." And I love breath work, by the way. But what are some baby steps of creating and understanding that nervous system?
I think my favorite thing is obviously when you do breath work, I always call it lazy man's yoga, right? Because we're laying down and putting our little eye pillows on and listening to the comfy music. It's not practical. It's not practical when you're sitting, at the bank and someone's having a moment, or you're standing in line at the grocery store. It's not practical. So what I have done is gone really deep into the research, and I got myself into the Heart Math Institute. Are you familiar?
Mm-mm.
So the Heart Math Institute is actually an institute that has studied the heart for over 25 years. And that is where this biofeedback sensor comes from.
Mm.
And what we learn about that is that the heart has its own brain. And it is so much smarter than the brain, right? Because what is the number one job of the brain? Do you know?
To keep the body doing the functions, I would guess.
Partly, yes, you're not wrong, but the number one function is to keep us safe.
Mm.
So when we're driving and someone cuts us off or whatever, we don't think, we just stop immediately. So, and it does it beautifully. I'm really happy that it does it. But if the number one job of the brain is to keep you safe, then what kind of choices and decisions are you making? Are they aligned with your heart? Or are they like, with your trauma goggles on where you want to
Yeah,
keep yourself safe because if it doesn't, your nervous system goes crazy.
right.
And so we're limiting ourselves from experiences all of the time because we're afraid. And so the one step that I always recommend for people, and it's basic, it's connect to your heart. And connecting to your heart means really just connecting to it, feeling it, and breathing through it. Imagining that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart space, and that'll immediately give you that calm. It is magic.
I believe that. I mean, I've been to quite a few trainings and things like that where we've talked about nervous system or how the brain works and the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And it's so interesting the way that the brain does things. I was actually speaking with a woman last week. We met at a basketball game, and she was telling me about a birth experience that she had had giving she's only had one baby, and she is really thinking she's done because it was such a traumatic experience for her. And she said, and the strangest thing was that I remembered the birth experience so different from what actually happened. And that when she went back and watched video footage of what actually happened, she said, that is not the way my brain remembered it at all. Like it was so
Wow.
fascinating for her to look back and see what it was that her brain changed or filtered out without her even realizing. And I think that's so interesting to imagine ourselves in our day to day or going through really rough experiences or past trauma or whatever it is, what actually happened and what is your brain protecting you from in maybe rewriting or omitting or covering something in the actual way that it turned out, right? It's just so interesting to consider
I
our
find it, I
human
find,
experience.
I find it offensive. It's like my brain isn't giving me the benefit of the doubt to
Yeah,
even
like how is it rerouting this? What is
like you're
happening?
telling me, my brain is telling me you can't cope with this. So let me just skip that.
Right. Edit the
It is
track.
crazy. It is crazy to think that, right? That's why I'm telling you, I find it offensive. I'm like, I could have totally handled that information.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great awareness though. And
Mhm.
it really helps us reframe, right? Reframe how we are seeing things and understand that through my lens, it may look this way, but there are so many lenses and it doesn't necessarily make it right or wrong. If we can just stay in a neutral space, that is key. If we can stay in a neutral space when we're receiving information from our kids, from our partners, from the people we work with, it allows us to not jump into conclusion. It allows us to hear and the difference between hearing, right? Hearing someone and listening to someone. Yeah, and stop assuming.
Yeah. I love that. And what I meant to say, and I skipped it, I apologize, my brain rerouted, is that our breath is the only thing we have control over that will directly affect our sympathetic nervous system and the
Right.
parasympathetic. Which one is it? That when we change our breath, It's the only
It's
thing that will
both.
change, right? Like the
It's
nervous
both.
system and how it's operating. So it's it's empowering to me to realize that everyone has breath. You have breath within you. Everyone has the ability to be able to box breathe, to focus on breath, to connect and think of the heart. I haven't done that exactly, thinking of my heart as I breathe. So I really like that perspective to try to connect that space with my breath.
It's so beautiful too, because one of the things that science has found is that the heart has an electromagnetic field that goes 3 to 5 feet outside of your body. So if you think of like an
Wow.
auric field, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it is all out there. And so one example that fascinates me is that if you are like, if your back is facing the door and someone walks in, you somehow know that there's someone behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the brain, right? The brain is not the one that's catching it, it is your heart.
Hmm.
And when you think of how powerful your heart has to be able to intuitively know exactly what is happening around it, it's fascinating.
That is
So
interesting.
the more you practice thinking or processing or making decisions with your heart, right? It's like a muscle. It's like going to the gym. You're developing a new neural pathway and you'll know things. The heart is so amazing. There's a reason why so many old civilizations have always revered the heart,
Mm-hmm.
right? Feel your heart, go into your heart. Like just so many different spiritual practices have led us to the heart. So now talking about it and allowing people to understand the science behind it, you realize that science has caught up to the woo woo.
Yes. It's so true. I actually, one of the classes I went to about the nervous system too suggested that if you are having a time of overwhelm or stress, that you actually look behind yourself and affirm that you're not being chased, which that is a very Neanderthalic beginnings of our brain of affirming that you are safe and no one is chasing you. And
Jeez.
so to reset, that's one of the ways that you can do that is looking behind you and confirming. And I thought that is so interesting. So there's so many developments of that intuition, but also our roots as a human species. It's like pretty impressive that it's just such a huge piece of mixed mediums that we're working with of our intuition, of our auras, of our early beginnings as a human species. It's just so fascinating to me. I'm curious as you're going through this work and helping people, specifically women business owners, what have been some breakthrough moments that you've seen while connecting and rerouting and biohacking the way that you coach people to do?
One of the biggest things is when our nervous system is not feeling grounded, we can't get to the next level, right?
Mm-hmm.
We stay stuck in a baseline. So, how do you shift baselines? And all it is, like I said earlier, it's like new level, new devil. And unless you're, working on your nervous system that's going to get ready, that's going to get you ready to jump and leap forward, I think that's really the foundational work of anything and everything. So working with business women who are trying to go to the next level, it is teaching them these fundamental tools and techniques that they can use everywhere because it's about practicality. And so, just as I described earlier, being in a room full of men
Mm-hmm.
and the energy being so different from them to us to me, and being able to handle myself in a way that I could stay in a neutral space because sometimes they would really trigger me. They would really trigger me, and my wild fighting warrior would come out, right? And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
really? You want to go there?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so thinking about how can I show up in a way that is non-threatening, not just for them, but for my family.
Right.
It's as simple as thinking, how can I show up without having to raise my voice?
Hey, parents, if bedtime feels like a battle, mornings are chaotic, or your little one struggles with big emotions, I've got something that can help. Introducing 5-Minute Meditations for Kids, a short, soothing podcast designed to help children calm their minds, build confidence, and manage emotions in a fun and gentle way. Each episode is filled with magical stories, mindful breathing, and relaxation techniques to help kids feel more grounded and at peace. Perfect for bedtime, car rides, or any moment they need a little reset. Subscribe now to 5-Minute Meditations for Kids wherever you listen to a podcast, and let's bring a little more calm to your home, one mindful minute at a time. Bonus, if you are a YouTube fan, we can also be found there with little videos that go along with our meditations as well. I like that you put it both that way, because I think in the boardroom or in the kitchen at dinner time, like you are in a space of high emotions where people aren't their best and they may be making demands or whatever the scenario is. So what are some tools that we can use in moments like that?
It's all basic. Connect to your heart. Like we don't have to do anything that's going to be so, and I think that's what the belief that we have is that if it's not hard, then it's not going to work or
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth investing it. What I have seen is, and what the feedback that I get, which I think is so funny, is that split second when you are ready to just say something. And the feedback is, in my head, I have a question. Do I really need to say this? Is there value in what I'm saying? Or do I just need to hear myself say it?
Mm.
And I get so excited because I've been there,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I've been there at that moment where I'm so triggered that I just want to like shotgun everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the thought, is that do I really need to, is there any value in what I have to say, or do I have the need to say it? And then I can make a choice of, oh, well, I just need to say it, and I can say it. What I also really appreciate is knowing that I can choose again, right? That it's not always going to be perfect. These tools are not going to make you superhuman and you're never going
Right.
to be triggered ever again. What it does is it gives you a special moment to create safety around you, because I also contribute to the chaos, or I could also be contributing to the peace.
Right. Yep.
So it is beautiful to have a choice, but when you don't have a choice, you can't make the best out of it. So I really appreciate connecting to the heart as being the way of anything and everything, whether it's in the kitchen or in the boardroom. The nice thing is that you can use them either or, and they're still going to be effective.
Right. Let's talk about human design. I know that's a big part of your business and your coaching, and that you also do that for women and children, that you actually will bring in the children scenario, which I find fascinating. I would love to hear more about that.
Human design has been such a blessing for me because being the oldest daughter of 5 kids and not understanding so many of the different things that happened growing up, now I can connect the dots and go, oh, so my parents are both manifesting generators, which is a hybrid, right? There's manifestors and then there's generators. Well, my parents were a hybrid, which means constant busyness.
Hmm.
So many projects that went unfinished that would drive me crazy because I am a generator and my generator type likes to get things done. Like I like completion. So my parents were also very defined. So the chakra centers were very defined, which meant that their energy was fixed. And I have a lot of openness, like you do with your projector self. I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of openness. So if you were to take my sacral away, I am a splenic projector, which is like mind blowing to me because I attract a lot of splenic projectors in my life. So that sacral gives me a lot of fuel, a lot of energy, but that openness means that I'm receiving and broadcasting a lot of energy from outside influence. So growing up with two manifesting generators constantly on the go was crazy for me, and they would exhaust me.
Mm.
Multitasking, it's not healthy for anyone. But I found myself operating in the same way because that's what I knew. Now, because of human design, I've learned to slow down, and I've learned to, yeah, I get frustrated very easily, but instead of quitting, I give myself a timeout. I can give myself some grace knowing that, that this is who I am by design, and it's okay. And, generator types and manifesting generators are known to quit. And either we quit too soon or not soon enough. And so it's really taught me how to go about life, especially if there's a project that I'm not too excited about, that maybe I said yes too soon, and knowing that maybe that's not where I need to be, and it's okay, right? Not overcommitting myself, because I believe that a lot of us who are in business, we tend to overcommit and overdo. And that's when I look at the chart and I'm like, yeah, I need to learn how to like value what I do without needing to do more, because that leads to burnout.
Oh, yeah,
That leads
definitely.
to burnout. So bringing in this human design with the children teaches you as a parent what each child needs individually, instead of parenting either A, the way we were parented, or B, the way we needed to be parented, right? Those are like the two options that we always kind of fall back on. It's the autopilot. But instead, as you're looking at your children and you're learning what their energy levels are, when you start to treat them according to their design, they feel seen, they feel heard, right? And it's difficult when we have many children. My mom always said, you guys are all like my fingers on my hand. You're all different and you all have different needs, but she didn't know how to, like, the overwhelm was real for her.
Hmm.
And she didn't really know how to give us each what we needed, which is really interesting when you look back, that we didn't have the awareness, and we knew as moms intuitively, but we didn't know. And for me, applying this with my daughter, who is her solar plexus is defined, so she's an emotional person, meaning she has emotional waves, very in tune with her emotions. And what that means is that she jumps from one emotion to the next really quickly because it's all very easy. And so one example that I have is, she was away in college and she had had something happen. So she calls me and she's just like, blah, crying. And so, of course, she reeled me in with the story. I had bought in. I'm like
Yeah.
ready to help. And then all of a sudden she says, oh, hold on a minute. I'm getting a text. And she looks at her phone and she says, oh, I gotta go. Someone's here. We're going to the mall.
Oh my gosh.
And I,
You're like,
I
wait,
was
I'm invested. You got me here. What's happening?
so invested, right?
Yeah.
So invested. Um, and before I would have taken it personal. I would
Mm.
have been like, you're so rude. Why can't, and so drama not needed. I was able to dial my nervous system back in and be like, all right, sweetie, well, when you're ready to talk, call me back. And she went on with her life, and I went on with my life. But it was really a perfect moment to have had this big explosive argument around, what are you doing? Like, taking it personal instead of making it about me, instead of giving her her moment.
Right. That's a really good example because I think that as a parent, we absorb so much of our children's needs and emotions where we want to help fix or try to protect them for any from hurt or ailment, when the majority of the time they simply want to be listened to and to have a sounding board with a uh-huh and tell me more rather than let me fix this. So that is a really, really good example of that.
It's so powerful. And I really give that credit to human design. And so when I work with women and I teach them about their energetic blueprint, they understand how they need support themselves. And so when you're even in a relationship with your partner, the more you understand about your partner, the more you can give them grace and the more you don't take it personal. So, ironically, my partner is a manifesting generator. So, of course, he
Uh-oh.
triggers me, right? Because he
Yes.
reminds me of my mom.
Yes. That's really funny.
And so it's been really fun now because I don't take it personal. It's by design. And so he's got a bunch of
Mhm.
projects that are unfinished. And so I have learned to re-engage him into the project, to be like, hey, together we can do this. And what ends up happening is he just goes off and he does it. So learning to re-engage, learning to communicate in the way that he understands without feeling threatened or feeling like I'm judging him or criticizing him about a project, just re-engaging him. Who would have known? It's
I
like,
love that. Yeah, that is a big deal. This is making me really curious about my spouse and my kids. I'm like, I need to look this up because I think it is interesting thinking of projects. There was one thing I did with my husband recently where he does not like DIY. And I grew up in a family where we really bond together through projects and connections and fixing things and making something better. And he did not. He's like, we kicked it and it didn't get better. And then we went golfing or we went and played basketball or whatever. Like that's just their love language. So, what I found, and just this is a new thing for us, but I said, hey, what if 1 hour on a Saturday, that is my time to ask you to fix or do the thing that is on my list. And I know it's not your list, but that way it puts it in parameters that is digestible for you. And he agreed. So I'm like, I am curious because that was something where I kind of made it less of a, if I ask you once, the asks keep coming, where
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of that when I ask for something and then he finally does the thing. And then I'm like, hey, and what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And what about that? And so he can avoid that place just by not getting into it in the first place. So putting the parameters of the 1 hour and then we're done. But this is new. So I'm like, I wonder what the human design is of that made that, other than just me thinking it's a fantastic idea. We'll see how that goes. But
Well, I think you nailed it, right? If depending on his design and the
mhm.
conundrums on his chart, sometimes overwhelm. So when
Yes.
we were when we did some work in the house, the guys are like, okay, so what colors do you want to paint? And I'm like, oh my God, there are so many colors. Can you give me choices? And they're like, we're not designers. And it's like, oh my God. And so I just need three choices. And
Hmm.
if I don't like them, then you can come back and give me three more choices. Otherwise, I get into overwhelm. And remember, I will quit, right? Because I'm a generator. I'm like, I'm frustrated. I don't want to deal with this. So I think you asking a yes or no question and him being able to go, oh, I can do that.
Hmm.
It is you understanding how to get him to do things instead of giving him the oh, it's like it's too much. No, like
Yes.
shutting down right now.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's
So
really fascinating. Well, tell our audience a little bit more about what it is that you offer in way of like connecting with you online and if people want to dig into this more with you.
well, Instagram is like my place to hang out at. I enjoy it. And it allows me to get creative with my presentations and with what I want to do. So Instagram is great. My website is actually great too. There's a lot of information there that just kind of takes you through what I offer. I've resisted calling myself a human design reader because to me, like you do a tarot card reading and then what? What do you do with that information? There's no
Mm-hmm.
structure, there's nothing there. So even though I refuse calling myself a human design reader, I still offer readings because I don't want to assume that people actually want to do something about it. People just want to know. They're curious to understand. And
It
if
is a different language because I know that once you I feel like it's one of those things where if you understand human design enough to understand there's a different language to it. You really have to get a book or you have to have a coach or you need someone who can kind of bring you into the world of it. Otherwise, it is overwhelming and there's just a lot to understand about it. So I think that is very relatable, where it's like, yeah, it's not a tarot card read where it's like this and that and see you later. Like it really is more involved.
Well, and there's so many layers of different onions to peel.
Hmm.
There's so many layers to it.
Especially with relationships and kids and understanding at home, business, personal, professional, like it could go on
So
and
many
on.
layers,
Yeah.
so many layers that you can go into. It's great. I think you have and the language thing is a thing, right? So traditional human design was created in the 80s, and it was created to teach you who you are not. So we refer to that not self as the unconscious piece, as your shadow space. And then one of his teachers that he taught, that he worked with, when he passed away, when Ra, who created this, Canadian guy who created this, uh, in the 80s, he passed away in 2011. And when that happened, she had a whole download around what's next for human design.
Hmm.
And what was born from human design, which is also very popular, are the gene keys. And Richard Rudd is still alive, so he continues to evolve with the process. Karen Curry Parker, decided that she was going to alter the work that she had already done and turn it into the quantum space. So it's an initiation from the traditional to the quantum. And the beautiful part of this is that the language shifted. So in traditional human design, you're a projector. And what he meant by that is that you project the energy of the room. So you're absorbing all of this energy, and you cannot make the difference between your energy and the room's energy. And so the example that I give around that is, you can be in a room and everyone's so excited about going to the movies, and you're going to go home, get ready, and meet at 8 o'clock at the movies. By the time you get home, you're like, I don't even want to go to the movies. I don't even know why I said yes. This is dumb. And so you don't go, right? And everyone's like, but you were the most excited one in the room. And you're like, yeah, well, it happens. Like, and so that energy is so important to understand, because then you get to step away and know whether or not you want to be a part of a group of or an event. So in the quantum space, we call the projector the orchestrator. And the orchestrator is the one that organizes all of the things based on the energy of the room. But when you start stepping into the space of, I'm the one orchestrating instead of projecting, there is such a big shift in how you feel. If you're the orchestrator and you are orchestrating the energy of the room, you're owning that energy. You're not projecting that energy. And then things start to shift a little different. There's a reframe with all of this. There's a change in the narrative of your story. And that you don't really see in traditional human design, although we talk about the deconditioning component of it, where we want to let go of other people's beliefs that we have brought on. Like I said earlier, we have this belief that if it's not hard, it's not going to work. So deconditioning from that and understanding that it could be very simple and very gentle, and it could actually be really fun to go through the process, allows us to grow in a way that doesn't feel heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I find with quantum human design. So in traditional human design, I'm the generator. And the way it was explained to me, which was so not sexy, was I am the slave of the world.
Yeah, no
Right?
one wants to hear that.
So I'm the generator. I'm here to generate energy because of my sacral energy. So in quantum human design, I am the alchemist. I create things. You come to me and you say, I really want to build this. And I'll say, okay, how soon do you want it done? And I get it done. So I am here to master the work that I love, which is so different from
Very
being the
different
slave of the
message.
world.
Oh yeah. You get
Yeah.
it done. Yeah, that's much more empowering and enlifting with what you want to do and see happen.
Yeah. So each of them have a place, right? The traditional I use because it's what's mainstream now, what people understand. But then when we start to go into the deeper work of it, is empowering you to want to be in the highest expressions of who you are.
Mm,
Giving yourself permission, they're permission slips because you already knew inside that you have these gifts, but the shadow is so much louder, and we see it even in our lives every day, right? The news doesn't have anything positive to say ever.
no. Yeah.
So having that noise like calm down and allowing that highest expression to take up space allows us to be allows us to show up in a better way, and understanding that if someone is having a moment and they're not showing up in their best self, they're showing up messy, it's understanding that A, it's by design, B, their nervous system is pretty messed up and they need some help, or C, it's none of my business. I'm not going to even get involved. I'm going to be in my happy bubble and I'm moving on with my life.
That's really empowering. I think that you are helping women to see where their strengths are and making it feel easier because they're simplifying it into not only accepting the design quote air quote flaws that we have, that it's okay to need the time to take the space to protect who you are and to honor those bursts of energy when they come, depending on, whatever it is that you have within you.
Right.
So I really appreciate that.
Well, human design is a tool that helps us in the evolution of who we want to be.
Hmm.
And, my particular life and soul purpose, which is called the incarnation cross, my personal one is to help people change the narrative of their life, move from victimhood into that empowered self. And so I think that's why it is so easy and so passionate for me to shift that, because I was able to shift my narrative, right? I come from a large family, and I am the oldest of that family, but I'm also an only child. So my mother and my dad separated, and then they both remarried. And so there was a lot of things that I went through, feeling detached from my dad, not feeling heard from my mom, because then she started a whole other family. So there's a lot of things that kind of kept, like you said earlier, it's the brain had like this rerun of a novel of being the victim. And so shifting from that victimhood into the empowered woman that I am, because I was born, like that in and of itself is a miracle. And we don't see it as that because our awareness hasn't gotten to that space. So having gone through it gives me a lot of passion to help others get there, because we get stuck in our stories and we continue to get into that habit. But again, it's a loop in our brain. Because of that neural pathway, we continue to strengthen it, we continue to take it to the gym, right? It's a big muscle. So it's about disrupting and really hacking the brain, right? Going into that brain and really going, okay, we've got to change what's going on here, because it's not conducive. It's not allowing me to be the happy, joyful human being that I am here to be.
Yeah.
And that is my goal. My goal of transformation is about transforming that trauma story that you have into something more beautiful, something more in line with who you are meant to be.
Mm, I love that. I love this conversation. There's so much more we could dig into. I'm like, okay, so quantum, you're talking past lives, right? Is that what you mean by quantum, or what do you mean by quantum?
The quantum is the space of possibility. It's just that there's so
Okay.
much possibility, right? We can
Okay.
we can go into past lives, and that's like a whole other item, right? Because
Hmm.
when we're talking about deconditioning, how do we get conditioned? We get conditioned by the imprint from our parents. We get conditioned by genetics, and now we understand epigenetics. So, like you were saying, there's reactions that we have that are so Neanderthal because
Yes. It's
it's
part of
in
our
our
DNA.
DNA.
Yes. Yes. It's
So
been
we're
there.
never going to be able to fully let go of that. We get conditioned by life experiences, and we get conditioned by, what we've grown up with. Like, what did we watch when we were young? We have this belief that the house has to be like this. You have to have two dogs, and you have to have like two kids, a house, a man, like all these different things. but that's not even true. We can have whatever it is that feels good for us. We don't need to be fed what we need to be doing. We need to be allowed to discover what feels good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the conditioning component that we're trying to get rid of, those beliefs that come passed down from generation to generation. And that's why I say my work is really foundational, because we work through all of that. And the way we work through all of that is through there's an amazing modality that was created in Germany. Uh, they're called family constellations. Have you heard of them?
Mm-mm.
So family constellations goes into your family system to put things in order. Because if there is an absent father, and let's say there are 4 children, and maybe the youngest is the boy, the mother will sometimes grab that boy and turn him into the man of the house, the one
Mm-hmm.
responsible for the home. So all of a sudden, he goes from being the youngest to taking the spot of the father, which does not belong to him, because then he, instead of being a brother to siblings, he becomes the father to siblings. And we see that often. So when he's out of his place, the energy in that dynamic changes. And so we need to put that energy back into place. And so that has really been the magic of the transformation that we go through, because it's nervous system work, but then it's also rearranging the energy and letting go of these thoughts that I have to be this for my mom. Well, if you have to be that for your mom, then that means that you are her mom, which means that you're taking your grandmother's place.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not your place. Your place is as a daughter. And all of that has been so instrumental for me, because as I was telling you earlier, it's like I could be my daughter's best friend. She could never be my best friend. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work that way. Energetically, it would be so much to put on her. And the same thing with the energy that we're talking about, as far as where do I belong? So sometimes my mother will become a little codependent, and I just have to say, you're the mom, I'm the daughter.
Mm.
You're the
Because
mom,
that
I'm the
is
daughter.
interesting when it gets, I think, when you get in that sandwich generation of aging parents and young kids and having to kind of, I think in the end, as you age out of this earth, you do become like a child where you need help with eating and bathroom, and that's a very interesting situation to be in because
But I
energetically
think
it is
I
different.
think when we learn how to respect our spaces in the system,
Mm-hmm.
then you get to choose out of your heart to be compassionate enough to care.
To be that caregiver. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it is a completely different space,
It's not
because
thrust upon you in the way of like
obligation. It
motion.
is not
Yeah.
obligation. It's like my parents have been so kind and so generous and so loving that I want to give back. And what a privilege it is to be able to caretake for my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like I love having conversations with my mom. I went no contact with her for so many years, and human design helped me realize that she is who she is by design. It wasn't like she was trying to do these things purposely. So it
Or
allowed
to
me
punish you.
it allowed me to step into forgiveness in a way that I've never been able to with all the work that I've done. It is through human design that I realized it's not personal. This is who she is.
Mm.
And now when I take her to the doctor, when I help her arrange her meds, when I, speak to her, it really comes from a place of I want to, not because I have to.
And which is a much healthier place for everyone, right? Well, this has been so fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing everything and being here today. Please tell our audience where they can connect with you.
Instagram, Akari, UHKARE, breathwork.
Awesome. And
UHKARE,
there's
breathwork.
breath work that you have available on your website, right?
I don't advertise it on my website.
More on Instagram.
More on Instagram.
Okay.
Breathwork, I don't have a lot of people that say, "Oh, I want to do a session with breathwork." I think I use it with my coaching, because again, breathwork is just so life changing
Mhm.
if you have the support and you have a framework behind it versus just
Yes.
doing breath work as a one off. I think that the practice of it, the ritual of it, is what really creates that expansion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm checking it out. I hope you are too. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. And for everyone who's listening, please make sure that if you appreciated this episode, that you leave a 5-star rating and review. Share this with a friend. Sharing is caring, and I care about all of you. Thank you for tuning in today. Hey, CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.